News.net is the parent body of Bay Hill News Network. We do Facebook Live for church service, funeral service, lecture, sporting activity. For more, contact at bayhillnewsnetwork@gmail.com or call 1784-529-8340.
Ship your barrels and household effects to St. Vincent and the Grenadines with SVG Direct. Jumbo barrels $70, medium $60, and small $50. We ship anything, name it, we ship it. Vehicles and more. Local agent, Adams Customs and Shipping Agency, 3rd floor, Baines Building, Kingstown, SVG. Telephone 1784-458-1328. In Canada, contact Michael 647-569-3285. Jumbie 647-657-7362. Remember, it's free pickup at your convenience, 7 days per week, anywhere in the Greater Toronto area with SVG Direct.
Nice Radio's Callaloo presents Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative and yes, certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard only on Nice Radio. First aired on Saturdays at 6 p.m. with repeat broadcasts on Sundays at 9 p.m. You can always catch us on the World Wide Web, www.niceradio.info. And remember, we are also on Facebook and YouTube. I am, of course, Keith Joseph. Today, dear friends, is Saturday. It is the 6th day of February 2021. Welcome to another edition of your favorite program, Just Another Look. Vincentians should, by this time, have grown accustomed to what is clearly the most difficult time in the country. Now, we are not talking about the pandemic. We are talking about the time each year when the government goes to Parliament, the legislative arm of government, not just one side, the legislative arm of government, armed with its estimates, followed by its budget. They are presented and then they are debated. But more than any other annual feature of governance, the estimates and budget presentations and their subsequent debates reveal the stark reality of what exactly constitutes governance in our country, as well as just how little consideration is genuinely given to uplifting the nation through quality leadership, quality representation, critical thinking, and an acceptance of the views of others, even if you disagree. We have been made to accept that debates on the estimates and budgets is perhaps the best opportunity to embarrass those from the opposition side. It is as though the estimates and budget debates are seen by the ruling regime as the best opportunities afforded it each year to demean the opposition and to give the country the impression that whatever the government decides to present is the best that the country can ever have, and that it doesn't matter what the other side says. They're only here to make up numbers, or they're only here because the Constitution says that they should be here. But really and truly, what they say don't matter, because we have already decided that this is what is best for the country. So in a very real sense, St. Vincent and the Grenadines operates a prime ministerial governance system that, like the rest of the Anglophone Caribbean, essentially in practice delivers estimates and budgets that really and truly do not require any debate, at least as far as they are concerned. So that for the government side, who prepare the estimates and budget, there is nothing you on the other side could say that would essentially want us to change our minds. And so, while opposition members would have engaged in careful study of the estimates and budget to the extent that time allowed them to do so after they have received the documents, it counts for naught. And all you get from the other side is a set of picon, because there's nothing you can say on that other side that would change anything we have already put in from this side. So they're there just to pompicet, as the people say, to showboat, to chest stump, and in the process talk a whole lot of rubbish. But they pat one another on the back to give the impression that we are doing so wonderfully well. Nobody else could have done it so well. And as the Prime Minister said, that is why I'm here. That's why I'm still Prime Minister. Because it is about that. It is about showing that we won the elections. And that gives us the right to prepare the estimates and the budget. You are just here because the Constitution says so. We don't really need you, because we are going to implement what we have put in the estimates and budget, come what may. So whereas it is to be understood theoretically, we're talking political theory, that there's ought to be some sort of separation of powers between the executive arm, which is the cabinet, the legislative arm, which is the parliament, made up of both opposition and government, and the judicial arm. In truth and in fact, we find little within these Caribbean islands, these little rocks that pop up through and flow across the archipelago. There's little by way of separation of powers in practical terms. And that's why people have lost much confidence in the judicial system. Because there's a feeling that the appointments of magistrates and judges are often too heavily influenced by politics. So that in a sense, when they talk of prime ministerial governance, they're suggesting that the prime minister, by virtue of being head of government, is head of cabinet, virtually allowed to do whatever he or she wants in parliament, and then voila, can talk about, as one prime minister said some years ago, they could go to whatever court they want, but when they finish, they have to come back to Papa. And it's amazing that nobody on the government side felt that an offensive statement. So while we look on television and talk about how members of Congress, Senate and the House of Representatives appear to be afraid of Trump, even though he's now out of office, many can point an accusing finger and says, it looks as though the members of parliament at the government side may well be mortally afraid of Gonzales, except perhaps for Julian Francis. So listening to the estimates and budget presentations in this country is one of the most mentally challenging exercise. One of the most mentally challenging exercise. Small wonder then that few Vincentians pay any attention. We can understand business houses, the Chamber of Commerce, they always have to find reason to listen to the budget. Government officials have to listen to the budget because they have to show government that they're so blindly supportive of everything that is done, that even though they may not agree with some aspects of the budget, they dare not say anything. You remember some years ago when Anne Eustace suggested that if we were going to place emphasis on tourism, the budgetary allocation to tourism at that time under Rene Batiste was woefully inadequate. Rene Batiste got up and said something to the effect that I'm happy with what I've been allocated. And that continued until eventually they moved her from tourism. Minister Glenn Beach knew what he was getting was inadequate. And even today, now that he's head of the Tourism Authority, he would not say it publicly, but one can understand the level of frustration that he must experience, along with the Minister of Tourism, that you're suggesting that we are one of the linchpins of the economy. But what's your annual allocation? When sometimes agencies relating to tourism can't even participate effectively in major promotional exercises abroad, you have an understanding of the myopia that is visited upon us and presented to us as governance. But unfortunately, you know, friends, the general public in this country seem to have no real interest in the long, boring hours that are essentially used to show off. That's what they do for the estimates and budget. Show off. Rather than display an appreciation for the fact that there are consequences for real flesh and blood human beings in this country. There are consequences because the decisions in respect of the annual estimates and budget impact their lives, impact the quality of their lives. The decisions that the ruling regime take with regard to the budget impacts the quality of life of Vincentians. There's no mention this year, you know, of the fact that the poverty assessment report that was released before the general election, nobody wants to talk about that, you know, from the government side. Because they say it has to be redone. Nobody talk about it being redone. It has to undergo peer review. Nobody talks about it having to do that now. because there's the hope that Vincentians would have all but forgotten it. That's the thinking from those who lead this country. That is the kind of analysis they hope they can make effectively to determine what happens in this country after the presentation of the budget. They know that the average Vincentian does not take the time during the course of the year to hold up the budget and say, but wait a minute, I thought we were supposed to do this. What happened to that? You're not going to deal with that until the next year's budget. By that time, they hope you forgot everything about it. Because they operate with the annual budget in much the same way as they operate with governance and elections. They come to you with promises, all that they will deliver. And they know that you are not monitoring and evaluating them. But come 5 years' time, they will be back by your door with more promises. And if possible, with cash and whatever else, in order to win your vote, if not buy it. That is the experience of the Caribbean political culture. And while we lay claim to enhancing our human potential through the education system, we recognize that far more are slipping through the cracks. And that's the reason we can play the games that we are playing with the resources that have been allocated for COVID relief. We have to understand the system with which we are working. Let us be ever mindful that despite what you have heard, and despite how it was delivered, one could have gleaned in the budget presentation this year, as you did last year, the seemingly invisible hand of the father, Dr. Gonzalez. In fact, those who are accustomed to applying their critical thinking skills may suggest, after closer analysis of the presentation, the subtle differences between father and son, and how it was evident, not just in the content, but in the manner of presentation. During the week's budget presentation, the Minister of Finance himself, at times, appeared not confidently familiar with the content of the document from which he was reading. Some listeners may suggest that he made too many simple reading blunders for someone who was responsible for the document. But listeners to Just Another Look are free to read into our comments here according to what you have heard, what you have analyzed. The choice is always yours. All we ask is that you take another look. But you know, we did not have to wait for the budget to know what was on the cards for this country. Because we have witnessed what has been happening. We watched as the games went forward. It is not now that people are asking for accountability for the Argyle International Airport. When the opposition did that at the completion of the airport, they were told, well, that's not a statutory body, and therefore there is no obligation to necessarily come to the house to explain anything about the expenses then. Why would you want to say that? Why would you want to say that? Because you know very well in saying that, it leaves people wondering, is there something that you wish to hide? You who boasted so much about transparency and accountability, about white-collar criminality, about the importance of rooting out corruption, sat idly by at the very beginning of your first term in office with the bridge over troubled water and a bypassing by a minister of government of all the regulations relative to the submission of tenders. Just after having been elected. So the stage was set. It's one thing that you say in the manifesto and on the political platform. There's something else when you got into office. So when there was no eagerness to discuss openly in Parliament the matter of accountability for the financing of the Argyle International Airport. Remember, at one point it was said, you see how we do things? We take a little bit from here and we put it over there. We take a little bit from there and we put it over here, etc., etc. That's why accountability was so important, and transparency. But instead, we find all kind of explanations as to why you don't necessarily have to give accountability. There's no accountability for the financing of the Commission of Inquiry into Otley Hall. Exactly how much money did this government spend running down some rabbit hole to try to create something that did not happen, or that they could not prove happened, or what have you and what have you and what have you? Where is Otley Hall today? And where is the accountability? We find all sorts of ways of skirting around real issues. And you know what is despicable? The fact that each time new members come into Parliament on the government side, they come and they sing off the same song sheet. So that it is amazing sometimes to listen. This year was perhaps one of the worst when you listen to the new members of government. You cannot believe that these people have consciences, that they have come from the body of the nation, of real flesh and blood human beings, Vincentians, who are struggling to survive. And they sit there gibbly and talk nonsense about this government has always done this government has always done that. Where on God's earth in St. Vincent and the Grenadines do they live? Or is it that they've been living in bubbles long before COVID-19 make bubbles possible? Incredible that new young members can get into the Parliament and just join the line and whine, as the old people say. Incredible. But before going further, dear friends, I want you to have an understanding of what happens in this country. You see, it's in the previous week, while debating the estimates for 2021, here is what took place.
I'm not sitting down because you're making a speech. Madam Speaker, I'm rising on a point of order. That's why I rose up. You should sit down.
I haven't finished my point of order.
No, but you're making a speech.
Honorable member.
You are the Speaker of the House?
Your speech is not
Why
a
you
point
want
of
to sit down and
order.
listen? You like to talk, sit down and listen.
That's the rules. Those are the rules.
Sit and
Honorable
listen.
members.
Good Lord. Everybody is sitting and
The
listen to you.
rules.
What do you think? You be a bad boy? Sit down.
You should sit down. You should sit down. You should sit down.
What do you think? You be a bad boy? What do you think? You be a bad boy? Sit down. What do you think? You be a bad boy? Sit down. Sit down. Bad boy. Sit down. Bad boy. Sit down. Bad boy. Sit down. Bad boy. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
Honorable member.
What do you think? You be a bad boy? You be a bad boy? You be a bad boy? Sit down. You be a bad boy? You be a bad boy? You be a bad boy? Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
Those are rules.
So do you think you be a bad boy? Bad boy? So do you think you be a bad boy? Bad boy? Sit down. Do you think you be a bad boy? Bad
sitting down. Sit down. I'm not sitting down. Sit down. Good Lord. Sit down. I'm not sitting down. Sit down. I'm not sitting down. Sit down. I'm not sitting down. You like it talk? Good Lord. Good Lord. Good Lord.
Sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down, bad boy. Sit down, bad boy. Sit down, bad boy.
I'm not sitting down. I'm not sitting down.
What do you think if you're a bad boy? What do you think if you're a bad boy? What do you think if you're a bad boy? You're bad boy. What do you think if you're a bad boy? What do you think if you're a bad boy? What do you think if you're a bad boy? You're bad boy. Good Lord. You like it talk.
Because they're making a speech.
You like it talk. Sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down, bad boy.
Here's what took place. And look at what followed. Here is what took place. Everyone in St. Vincent and the Grenadines who knows Ralph Gonsalves, who understands his politics, and who understand him as a human being, a social being, knew that he was totally flattened by what you have just heard. Totally flattened. And as we mentioned in our previous edition of Just Another Look, first aired on Saturday, 30th January 2021, Gonsalves may well have grown so accustomed to doing as he pleases in Parliament and get away with it that he perhaps thought that it would be as normal. He never expected that Godwin Friday would have had the spunk to react in the way in which he did and to stand tall, insist he will not sit, and deliver one of the most scathing messages to Prime Minister Gonsalves. But you see, Gonsalves is not accustomed to being managed. Not accustomed, except as we say, perhaps from Julian Francis. Others are so scared. And we have had very weak and accommodating speakers in the House of Assembly. But there was a time when Jomo Thomas stood his ground as Speaker of the House of Assembly and decided there are rules and there are rules and they're applicable across the board. Gonsalves didn't seem to be too happy with that. But by that stage in his career, Thomas decided he was going to apply the rules as he saw fit. And perhaps even to this day, Gonsalves may, in his own imagination, be still seeing Jomo Thomas as the young boy he knew who stood among them when they paraded themselves as the progressives for this country. And he has perhaps somehow been unable to face the fact that Jomo has grown, while he, Gonsalves, instead appears to have been stymied, stuck in the rut of a decadent political tradition from which he seems incapable of extricating himself. Jomo Thomas stood up to Gonsalves' behavior in Parliament, a feat that not only put the comrade in his place, but more importantly, revealed Thomas's willingness and preparedness to stand toe-to-toe if necessary with him on matters of law. And even after Thomas has moved out of office, you've seen much of that tiff taking place from time to time. Gonsalves' bravado did not and does not faze Jomo Thomas. All credit to Jomo. And we are aware that that is not the end of it. But during the estimates, as you have heard, Gonzalez appeared to have thought that he could behave as is his wont. But this time around, it was not the Speaker of the House that stood ground. Instead, Gonzalez received, as you have heard, a bushwhacking from the leader of the opposition, Godwin Friday. It was a bushwhacking of an order and delivered in a demeanor that he never anticipated, and which, having caught him flat-footed, left him totally emaciated, totally humiliated. Indeed, dear friends, dear listeners, Godwin Friday's humiliation of Gonzalez in the House was so poignant, was so impactful, that it immediately found its way on social media all around the world, not just in our diaspora, all around the world, remixed to music to an extent that the Prime Minister will not and ever overcome in his lifetime. This one, he will not be able to control. This one, he will not be able to overcome. It is something that will ride him like a Trojan horse for the rest of his life. The subtlety of Friday's stinging command, "Sit down," flung across the hallowed halls of Parliament. "Sit down," ripped the sting out of anything Gonzalez could master. "Sit down," and it left him fighting for air, the wind completely taken out of his sails. Dear listeners, Vincentians who know Gonzalez as a politician, as a human being, as a social being, were certain that he would readily seek out an opportunity, any opportunity, or perhaps every opportunity to strike back at Godwin Friday. And they were sure in their own minds that he would use the same hallowed halls of Parliament to do so. This is his comeback, in part.
As far as I know, choke me, as far as I know, I am the Prime Minister St. Vincent, you are the leader of the opposition. You hear me? And you are debating our estimates. People's Choice way. You are the choice. You are the choice of some people who's selling. You want to sell the patrimony of this country with passports. Yes, and I'm saying it again. You want to sell the soul of this nation. You will never be able to do it so long as Ralph Gonzalez is alive, including citizenship and passport. Including citizenship and passport. Well, if you think you can block road against the comrade, try that. Try that. You try that. You try that.
So you have heard Friday demanding and insisting that Gonzalez sit down. And you have heard Gonzalez's apparent comeback. But there are several aspects to Gonzalez's comeback that need to be addressed. If only because they speak, or they appear to speak, to a bit of the pot calling the kettle black. You know that old people saying, we like old people saying, you know, the pot calling the kettle black. Just Another Look has always insisted that Gonzalez seems to consider himself almost infallible. But in addition, the way Gonzalez conducts himself in Parliament, the way he conducts himself sometimes on political platforms don't seem to be much different. But sometimes the way he conducts himself in Parliament may well leave many asking whether or not he thinks he's some sort of bully. Whether or not, like Trump, he believes that people should be afraid of him. Whether or not, like Trump, he believes that he has the backing of his minions. And as a result, he could almost say anything. And in what we can only describe as his unfortunate banter, which you just heard, Gonzalez suggested that words do not fail him. Words do not fail him. As he said, words don't fail me. Words don't fail me. So when then, what Just Another Look is saying here and now, that Vincentians are aware that words don't fail Gonzalez. And we are happy that you're saying it yourself. Words do not fail me. And that is the reason why we have said without fear of contradiction that he knew exactly what he was doing each time he chose to label people, whether it be lowest common denominator, minority wrongs, malignant and dishonest, dirty stinted dog, etc., etc. Each time he mentioned those, it was part of the fact that words don't fail him. That's why you got the treatise on the middle finger. That's why you got the information on the whatever else hole. Words don't fail him. He knows exactly what he's saying and why. That's why we ask the question whether it was evident or intent to deliberately talk about who George Bush will recognize in the middle of the night, and whether or not those words at the time had racist connotations. That's why we made reference to how suddenly we were talking about the choice. Who was Barabbas? Who was the man without hair? Words don't fail him. Words don't fail him. We ought to be very clear in our minds, therefore, that Gonzalez is well aware of what he is saying at every turn. He wants us to take him at his word. That's why he went after Kenton Chance, in part. So you see, since he knows the value of his words, and words don't fail him, then perhaps he can explain to us why he had to talk about a reassuring kiss some time ago. And you know the incident, so we don't have to repeat it here. What was it that occasioned the reassuring kiss? Was the reassuring kiss warranted when it was given? What do not fail you? What was the intention there? And does the average Vincentian have to wait upon you for you to also say when it is you're lying? What are the certain things that you choose to lie about? Because you were the ones who said you may lie about certain things. You may then turn around and say, like you said recently, you were taken out of context. You were taken out of context. But here we have your words in a tiff, which we identify as an attempted comeback at Friday for what he had done earlier in the debate on the estimates. And we have an understanding. Words don't fail you. But perhaps that is one of the reasons why your books, despite their numbers, seem to remain unsold, even in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But you know, if you listen to what we played, the segments we played earlier, one of the laughable aspects of Gonzalez's attempted comeback at Friday was his suggestion that Friday delivered an actor's performance. He was attempting to suggest that Friday was acting out for quote-unquote people he said were funding him. He knew that. He's saying you're more or less repeating what they tell you. You're an actor. Yeah? But it is one of Gonzalez's most laughable attempted comeback. His statement about who is acting is incredible, given that close analysis of Gonzalez's entire political career often leaves critics pondering as one long, boring political pantomime featuring a highly overrated actor in training. Go through his presentations. Go through his political career. There are many who believe that his first independence address, where he hopscotched over 17 years of NDP rule, was part of his acting craftsmanship. Because they cannot believe, and still cannot believe up to now, that someone so scholarly, someone so highly certified, someone with such a photographic memory can forget all that was said about Cato. But in that first independence address, so much was said, so favorably. And then you hopscotch the 17 years of the NDP rule. Amazing. Amazing. That many were left wondering, where is the quote-unquote scholarship of this young man? And what is it about his politics that allowed him to ignore 17 years of governance? 17 years that reflected major economic growth. Because like Trump, who tried to destroy everything that Obama, or turned away everything and turned back everything that Obama achieved, Gonzalez appeared so eager to ignore everything that the NDP achieved. It is as if the country had stopped after NDP came into office in 1984. Everything stopped until Gonzalez came in so he could continue what Cato had done. But he forgot. He forgot why Cato had to call elections. But he credits himself and the roadblocks for having ended the NDP's term of office. He credits himself. virtually as the king of the road. Where in God's name he got that idea, no one knows. But maybe he believes that it is still Massa Day that allows flocks and flocks of black people to go behind the great white hope. Maybe he believes it's still the days with the cock hat and the horse and the whip, commanding the black people, the descendants of slaves, to continue to act in concert as if nothing has changed. Like Trump. Like Trump. Before Trump, there was Gonzalez. Before Trump got into that kind of political arena, Vincentius knew of Gonzalez. What is so different between them, dear friends? Remember we did a program once that showed you the similarities between Gonzalez and Saddam Hussein? One of these days, we'll show you the similarities between Gonzalez and Donald Trump. But Gonzalez's leadership comes across as a long, boring political pantomime featuring a highly overrated actor in training. Not one that has even graduated, one in training. And now he has his son as another actor in training. You see, when you reflect on what you heard in the tape as Gonzalez's seeming attempted comeback at Friday, just another look fancied Gonzalez's assertion that Friday, quote, was involved in a set of imaginative embellishments. Imaginative embellishments. And we rather like that assertion, if only because one is often tempted to characterize Gonzalez's major political prattlings in a similar manner. We get one set of imaginative embellishments after another. And that's why we talk about the old people saying the pot calling the kettle black. You want an embellishment? You want an embellishment? Go back to Gonzalez's presentation in January 2011 on the estimates, before they start the discussion on the estimates. When he spent all but 40-something minutes or more trying to convince God knows whom that somebody was trying to kill him, that there was some plot to kill him, that they find a high-powered gun, then they hear another one come, then somebody in the prison had a phone, and they took that phone away, and then he got another phone, etc., etc. All a set of poppycock. What was it other than a set of imaginative embellishments? No one, as far as we're aware, was ever arrested on the strength of the information he presented in the House of Assembly at that time. What was it if not a set of imaginative embellishments? What was it? So that Gonzalez's attempt at characterizing the leader of the opposition presentation as a set of imaginative embellishments can only best be characterized as the pot calling the kettle black. But it went further. If we go back to what you heard, Gonzalez turned across in the parliament and said, "You know you're talking nonsense. You know you're talking nonsense. But if one listened to the budget presentation and much of what the government ministers regurgitated over the several days, the description that Gonzalez inferred in respect of Friday during the estimates may be readily considered more appropriate to and for them almost without exception. Almost without exception. You could easily turn around and say, like Gonzalez was inferring, you know you're talking nonsense. You know you're talking nonsense. Because you heard in the debate Montgomery Daniel get up and sing the praises of his own constituency. Yeah? He's saying the praises of his own constituency. To me, North Windward as a constituency is the best constituency in the whole world. You know you're talking nonsense. You know you're talking nonsense, right? To me, North Windward as a constituency is the best constituency in the whole world. You know you're talking nonsense, right? Let's apply Gonzalez's own phrase. You know you're talking nonsense, right? And then the same Daniel, the only constituency that I would yield to is the constituency of North Central Leeward. Seemingly pandering to Papa, the parliamentary representative for that constituency, North Central Windward. You know you're talking nonsense, right? You know you're talking nonsense. So that is what we have to understand. You know you're talking nonsense. So when you heard some of the members in Parliament, Ralph's concept and the words he flung across the room applying to Friday could easily during the budget debate be thrown back all around him as his minions one after the other delivered what they thought were their presentations and say with confidence, you know you're talking nonsense. You know you're talking nonsense. Yeah, that's it. One is not certain, dear friends, as to how many persons on the government side, how many persons on the government side took the time to analyze what the Minister of Finance and his daddy may have considered appropriate for St. Vincent and the Grenadines and had wrapped up in the budget in these difficult times. You see, there's a sense in which, on the one hand, they're talking about a so-called education revolution. On the other hand, they continue to operate in a rather simplistic and annoyingly embarrassing way that seems to suggest that the listenership haven't gone anywhere in terms of education. There's a feeling that the average Vincentian does not have a desire for accountability and transparency in government. They don't seem to be valuable. They don't think that the average Vincentian has gone sufficiently advanced in education. So at this stage, almost 20 years after being in office, to be demanding that you are the ones who said in 2001 on all the platforms that you will introduce integrity legislation. Yet after nearly 20 years, it cannot find its way in terms of priorities on your legislative agenda. So it has to be that you really don't believe you are leading an education revolution. Because education facilitates critical thinking. It facilitates a questioning of issues, of decisions relative to real life, to their existence on a daily basis in their society. But they are so dismissive of anything that is even remotely critical in terms of analyzing their decision making and the decisions that they actually make and how they impact people's lives, that they get upset. That is why we could hear someone talking the other day about, fake news. Fake news. Because people were criticizing the testing regimen. Fake news. And you have people still waiting weeks for tests. But you stop mentioning fake news once whether your assistant commissioners or deputy commissioners come out and expose a situation. You say nothing on that though. You leave that. You leave it. So the speeches that we get in Parliament from the government side seem to suggest an almost total capitulation to what Papa and son prepared and delivered. Much like what transpired with Trump in his years as President of the United States. Gonzales the Elder appears to have convinced himself that he had been able to garner almost total capitulation from all but Julian Francis, of whom he seems mortally afraid. You see, for all the talking, Gonzales is well aware. And he could keep talking about being king of the road and whatever else he wants, and the master of demonstrations, etc. Nothing would have happened in April, May 2000 if Julian Francis and his A-team did not ensure things were in place to block the roads. Many of the ULP people were sleeping. They woke up in time to be at the roadblocks, but they didn't do any road blocking. But they benefited from the roadblocks orchestrated by Julian Francis and his A-team. You see, the old people on hearing Gonzales the Elder declare in Parliament to the opposition leader, "You know you're talking nonsense," would probably have quickly countered by saying, "Physician, heal thyself." You're peeping in your own bowl. You see, if Gonzales is sufficiently conscientious, if Gonzales dares to be blatantly honest about the contributions of many of his ministers in Parliament on almost any topic, the phrase, "You know you're talking nonsense," could readily be applied with relative ease. When Gonzales sat there some years ago and heard Montgomery Daniel deliver an explanation as to why farmers, arrowroot farmers, left their crops to rot in the ground, he suggested that the economy, the extension economy, was doing so well that they left their hard work, their sweat, the product of their sweat, in the ground to rotten because they were too busy clearing barrels. Tell me whether or not you ought not to have applied the phrase, "You know you're talking nonsense," right? You know you're talking nonsense. Because clearly, it was a sign that the economy, where the people relatives were doing better. And so they were sending things home. Because your farmers didn't reap the crop and therefore didn't have any money to send up there to buy anything. It was the other way around. So you know you're to tell them you're talking nonsense, right? And in a similar vein, when Gonzales himself mentioned in one forum that Gerald Thompson was arguably the brightest man in cabinet. The other members must have been thinking, you know you're talking nonsense, right? You know you're talking nonsense. Which is why, in one of the talk show programs, people say, well, if suddenly we are hearing that Gerald Thompson is a specialist in an important area of health, then why is it he was not called upon to head the task force with this pandemic? He is a specialist on infectious diseases. Should he not have been the person best suited to head the task force? Right? But some people might have been saying, you know you're talking nonsense, right? Oh, you know you're thinking nonsense if that is what you're thinking. Okay? So, the fact of the matter is that even when Daniel in the recent budget debate said to me North Windward as a constituency is the best constituency in the whole wide world, Gonzalez must have been chuckling to himself. You see, Gonzalez, like most parliamentarians, could only chuckle at the dismal performances of people elected and or appointed to serve in the best interests of the people of this country on his side of the house. On his side of the house. Some people argue, that people tend to feel, leaders tend to feel that they're all the better for having around them people who they deem to be less qualified than themselves, less capable than themselves. It allows them to feel that much more elevated, that much more in charge, that much more arrogant. But while we are speaking of Montgomery Daniel, his nemesis in the recent general elections, and who will remain his nemesis as long as he stays in office, Chevron John, delivered a masterful presentation in the budget debate. Her contribution was a classic reminder to the likes of Montgomery Daniel of what constitutes class. Class. Of what constitutes a studied presentation. And how a parliamentarian should prepare for and deliver a budgetary presentation. Actually, her presentation would have been a good lesson for those new members on the government side. And what Just Another Look advises Chevron John to do now is to package her presentation in a video and to make a personal gift of it to Montgomery Daniel so that he could sit there and learn the many lessons from it. But let us return to Gonzalez's father and son. In trying almost vaingloriously to get back at Friday, at one point he says, you're quoting Kenton Chance as an authority? Here where you reach now. You're quoting Kenton Chance as an authority. Here where you reach now. Right? So Kenton Chance, journalist, becomes defeated. And we ask how and why was Kenton Chance brought into the conversation? Was it just what Friday said? Or was it that Gonzalez may well have been a little anxious to get an opportunity to say or to imply what he thinks about Kenton Chance? Because we can tell you from our analysis, Kenton Chance's commitment to integrity journalism continues to impress. But he does not seem anxious to divert from his commitment to integrity journalism to facilitate the whims and fancies of anyone, including the Prime Minister of the country. So we may ask ourselves, is it that Kenton Chance has gotten under the skin of Gonzalez? That is one who is not prepared to surrender his soul on the altar of political expediency or economic expediency for that matter. Is it that Gonzalez wants Kenton Chance to use his journalistic medium to sing his praises, to resist the temptation to try to bring to the nation a fair appreciation for what is said and done in this country? Is Kenton Chance now an apparent target? Just Another Look is insistent that the whole issue of Gonzalez vis-a-vis Kenton Chance may well be much deeper than what we heard in this conversation. We may go further and insist that it may have to do with Kenton's professional approach to journalism in this country, where he refuses to be cowed into submission and to join the chorus of ULP minions. But in speaking of Kenton, we will remind listeners of Kelson McDowell, who was at Radio 705, NBC Radio 705. And of the questions he raised in a press conference with Gonzalez, and of Gonzalez's response. People must remember these things, because from the very early days, it is that Kelson understood very clearly the politics of Gonzalez. And perhaps that is what motivated him to leave and go back to England very quickly. But here is Gonzalez in the tape you heard. You quoting Kenton Chance as an authority. Here where you reach now. Here where you reach now. You be the judge there, people. But in the tape you also heard Gonzalez suggesting and arguing with Friday and bellowing across the room, you want to sell the patrimony of this country. You want to sell the very soul of this country. Wow. Can you imagine Ralph saying that, right? What did he say again? You know you're talking nonsense was the phrase he used earlier. He is accusing Friday of wanting to sell the patrimony of this country. Dear listeners, do you know the full extent of what agreement was made with regard to Mr. Ames when he was operating the Buckerman Bay Resort? Do we have any evidence of where it is? Do you, dear friends, have any evidence of the total cost financing involved in the Utley Hall inquiry? Do you have anywhere the full statement of accountability showing transparency for the monies received and expended on the Argyle International Airport? More recently, we had the situation of Marcus de Freitas. How many years ago did the court rule for Marcus to get his money? How many years? And yet, Marcus is made to get old and perhaps fossilize and perhaps die before he gets his money. What about the people at Argyle? You needed their land for the airport, but you don't think they needed their money for the land that you took? They have to wait until you feel it necessary to do it? Is that how it works? How many of the deals made with investors on Canoan have been brought to the Honorable House to declare every aspect, how every cent, every document that was signed is made known to the entire country? When we sold Peter's Hope to some investors for $5 and something cents a square foot, tell us about our patrimony. Tell us about our patrimony. Could Vincentians have gotten the land at Peter's Hope for that same price? Tell us about our patrimony. Why did we not lease Sandals the land at Bookament? Instead, you people bending over backward to explain why we had to sell it to Sandals. And not only that, but we acquire the farmer's land to sell it to Sandals. Did the farmers get a fair price for their land in the sense that Just Another Look is considering a fair price as that which you sold it to Sandals, because you're taking it from Vincentians to sell it to foreigners? The people who owned it should be the beneficiaries of all that comes with that sale. Not you buy it from me to sell it at a higher price immediately. If you know that that was the value you're going to sell it, give me that. Don't give me anything less than that. Give me exactly the price for which you have sold it. That is how we protect our patrimony. On the own, you see, we have complained in the past of people who have acquired other people's property. We are asking people to have an understanding that from your vantage point, Friday is selling the patrimony or willing to sell the patrimony of the country. And you would not, that will never happen as long as you have anything to do with politics. But you tell us how you have treated our patrimony. You explain to Vincentians how you have treated our patrimony. And what you're listening to, you know, friends, what you're hearing is clearly what we have been addressing all along over the years. Of somebody empowered by virtue of winning an election and of beginning to take on board ways of behaving that seem to suggest that they're Lord and Master of all. How is that fair in our society? How does that work for us in our society? How does that allow us to develop our society? Many seem to think that we are doing well, and that you feel that because a man tell you sit down, you feel you're bad boy, sit down, that you have to wait for a time when you could get back and get back, and then you come and you do this thing in Parliament, including suggesting you know you're talking nonsense, right? you know you're talking nonsense. And we ask, who's talking nonsense? Who is talking nonsense? When you listen to the budget and the chorus of yes men that come up one after the other, many ill-prepared, who talking nonsense? Who talking nonsense? But you know, who defines patrimony in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Lord Ralph? Because it now seems that Gonzales can remember Vincentian patrimony when it suits his own pride and purposes. But as the young people say so many years ago, Ralph, wheel and come again, bro. Wheel and come again. You, not you. You are not the one to preach, and certainly not in Parliament, about sale of Vincentian patrimony. Because, like you yourself said, could we quote you? Could we quote you saying, you know you're talking nonsense? You know, the last statement about Friday wanting to sell the soul of the nation is laughable. Because Ralph does not even appear as though he can begin to know what is the soul of this country. Far less being eligible to speak of someone else selling the soul of this country. Remember, words do not fail him. And this statement may have many more meanings than Ralph himself understands. Maybe the intention is to take the conversation into another realm. A realm where the soul takes center stage. But we will deal with that in another issue as we tackle the budget. St. Vincent and the Grenadines in our next issue. Today, dear friends, is the 6th day of February 2021, 5,146 days after the disappearance of J8VAX. Piloted by Dominic Gonzales with Rashid Ibrahim on board. They disappeared on Sunday, the 19th of November, 2006. Today marks 3,836 days since the disappearance of another SVG aircraft, J8SXY, a Cessna 402. And just so you would remember, this aircraft left St. Vincent on the evening of Thursday, 5th August 2010, bound for Canouan. And like J8VX, it simply disappeared without a trace. We remind you too that on the 19th of September 2008, Patricia Bowman, driving to work in bad weather, was crushed to death in her own car because a wall from somebody's building, somebody's property, collapsed on her vehicle, crushing her to death. Her husband, Albert Bowman, is still awaiting justice. Justice. You've been listening to another edition of Nice Radio's Callaloo presentation, Just Another Look. Just Another Look is an innovative, exciting, albeit decidedly provocative, and yes, they are certainly controversial, socio-political analysis of issues of a local, regional, and international nature. Just Another Look is heard only on Nice Radio, first aired on Saturdays at 6 p.m. Repeat broadcasts on Sundays at 9 p.m. But remember, you can always catch us on the World Wide Web, www.niceradio.info, and find us on YouTube and Facebook. I am, of course, Keith Joseph.
Ship your barrels and household effects to St. Vincent and the Grenadines with SVG Direct. Jumbo barrels $70, medium $60, and small $50. We ship anything, name it, we ship it. Vehicles and more. Local agent, Adams Customs and Shipping Agency, 3rd floor, Baines Building, Kingstown, SVG. Telephone 1784-458-1328. In Canada, contact Michael 647-569-3285. Jumbie 647-657-7362. Remember, it's free pickup at your convenience, 7 days per week, anywhere in the Greater Toronto area with SVG Direct.